empowering women. Thank you so much for joining me today for this session on mentorship and sponsorship. I am thrilled to be here with you at the Empowering Women in Industry Conference 2020 being held virtually. I know it's sad that we can't be together in person, but I think we're doing the next best thing, and we're taking the opportunity to learn and network here with one another. So give yourself a pat on the back for taking the initiative to show up. All right, let's get into our discussion on mentorship and sponsorship. Okay, so what are we going to cover in today's presentation? Let me start with the star in the center. I would like to ask you to grab a physical piece of paper and a pen to take notes. And there's a reason I'm asking you to do it on physical pen and paper. So please take a moment right now while I finish going through the agenda to grab pen and paper. There's going to be several things that come up in the discussion that I want you to handwrite down. And those specific things are going to have stars on the PowerPoint, and I will speak to those specific things. And one reason that I ask people to physically write things down is because the research has conclusively shown that you retain information better when you handwrite it down versus typing it out. Okay, so what's on the agenda? We're going to talk about the different types of mentorship, finding a mentor. We'll talk about the difference between mentorship and sponsorship. And then we'll get into what does sponsorship look like and how do you land sponsorship. Okay, if you think about it, mentoring is something humans have been doing since the dawn of time. To quote Susan Colantuono, we've done this informally through stories, role modeling, teaching, advising, and rewards and punishments. All this to teach boys and girls their role in society. The definition of a mentor is someone who has knowledge and will share it with you. It can be anyone whose opinion you respect. There are different types of mentors or mentorship, and some ways you can distinguish mentorship include the level of individuals involved, like traditional mentorship versus peer mentorship. You might hear the phrase reverse mentorship, which is about when a more senior level person gets mentored or learns from a younger professional. The highlight here, and what I want you to write down for number one, is this: I can find and access many different types of mentors. All right, one more time. Write this down for your number one star. I can find and access many different types of mentors. You could also think about mentorship in terms of domains or domain expertise, and that's something that we will talk about next. This is not exhaustive. These four categories that I'm showing here on the screen are simply a way to begin thinking about the different types of information and advice you might need to be successful in your career. So these delineations, these different domains where you might need mentorship, they're many and varied. And you're not likely to get all of these types of mentorship from one person. So it's more likely that you'll have to initiate piecing together from a number of different and informal sources. So once more, these domains are simply a way to think about the different components that you might ultimately need to succeed in your goals. So let's talk about each one briefly for a moment. Technical would be something like the engineering or scientific domains where you want to gain expertise. Networking and communications, that's something that you can work on and get better at through involvement with professional organizations, including Empowering Women in Industry. It's something that you can improve on through report writing and proposal writing and soliciting the feedback of more senior colleagues when you work on these things. You can also practice and improve through public speaking opportunities. So you can submit to speak at different types of conferences like this one, or trade organizations that are specific to your particular domain. Let me just add to that that you can also do this in the workplace. So everybody has something to teach other people. So is there something that you can do a short presentation about, like a brown bag over a lunch at your company, to teach others? That's a great way to not only practice public speaking, but also practice soliciting and taking feedback from your work. Okay, and then another area that you might need mentorship could be something like workplace politics. And I want to share a quote about that. It goes like this, and this is from Bonnie Marcus in The Politics of Promotion. Every organization has a unique political dynamic. In fact, each team within a business line or function often has a different language, different success metrics, and behavioral norms. You have to be willing and capable of adapting, not only to get ahead, but also to stay ahead. You must ask yourself, what is possible for you in the future if you are willing to learn how to effectively navigate the realities of the workplace? I think that captures it well. And then business acumen is another really important area that you might need mentorship. So what I mean by this is understanding your business, where it's going, and your role in taking it there. Okay, so it's time for a bit of a personal story. This is a picture of me on a job site when I was back in Florida. And I was a young professional at that time, and I had multiple different mentors. So let me briefly describe each of them to you. There was a mentor in my life who was an engineer who started a successful consultancy. It grew to be a really big, successful business, and he ultimately sold it off. So that was one person. Then there was another engineer that I interacted with who had taken a really traditional path of working their way up the corporate ladder. And at the time that I was working with her, she was this big time executive for a Fortune 500 company. So her path was not entrepreneurial, but she was definitely incredibly successful in her own way going up the corporate route. And then there was another engineer that I interacted with who had gone the construction route. So he worked for a contractor basically his entire career and ended up having quite a bit of ownership in that company. So what was interesting to me, what I noticed, is that I could ask each of these people the same question, and I would get three very different answers. The advice that they would give me was really based on their own past experience and the sort of lenses that that created in how they see the world and they see opportunities. And so what I'd like you to write down for this one, for number 2, is this statement. I can always learn something from people around me, and I will remember that advice will come through their life lens. So one more time, take a minute to write this down for number 2. I can always learn something from people around me, and I will remember that advice will come through their life lens. So this question comes up a lot with young professionals. How do I find a mentor? Well, I don't recommend asking total strangers who don't know you any more than I'd recommend recent grads on the job hunt to blindly approach strangers on LinkedIn. Like anything in business, it begins with relationships. You have it within your power to build a relationship with anyone who's receptive to you. And let's be honest, most people are willing to open the door to a conversation to just about anyone if they're approached in the right way. Okay, so this is going to bring us to number 3. So on the next slide, I want you to write down the whole statement and recommendations for number 3, okay? I can develop a relationship with another human using several different tools. Number one, common interests. Number two, extracurricular activities. And number three, technical expertise or career path. So again, write this down for number three. What could be common interests to build on? It could be a common appreciation for a particular author or thought leader. For number two, I think the best extracurricular activities are the common organizations and respective committees you can be involved with your colleagues. These are a great way not only to make initial connections, but to build long-term relationships over time. And then number three really drives home what we all know, which is that people like to talk about themselves. If you ask a subject matter expert about their expertise or career path and show a genuine interest in them and a willingness to listen, people are usually likely to make the time to share with you. So I want to emphasize for number three, you have to make it about them, not about you. I want to read something to you that I think is important. This is an excerpt from a book. So I'm going to read it through twice. And this first time, I just ask you to listen to me as I read it to you. And then the second time, I'll put the words on the page. Job applications in all capital letters. Junk mail with a misspelled name. Salespeople who are eager to open an account but never follow up. Doctors that don't bother to call to see if a new medication worked for a long-time patient. People settle. They settle for less than they are capable of. Organizations settle too, for good enough instead of best in the world. If you're not going to put in the effort to be my best possible choice, why bother? Is, well, no one better showed up, a valid strategy for success? Are you hoping to become a success because you're the only one being considered? Okay, so one more time going through this. Job applications in all capital letters. Junk mail with a misspelled name. Salespeople who are eager to open an account but never follow up. Doctors that don't bother to call to see if a new medication worked for a long-time patient. People settle. They settle for less than they are capable of. Organizations settle too, for good enough instead of best in the world. If you're not going to put in the effort to be my best possible choice, why bother? Is, well, no one better showed up, a valid strategy for success. Are you hoping to become a success because you're the only one being considered? So this is an excerpt from the book called The Dip by Seth Godin. He's one of my favorite authors. I recommend checking out any book of his. But I feel like this excerpt drives home a point that I want to get to next, which is this. You do have to stand out, not because this is a competition. There's plenty of space for each of us to have the success that we want to have. But because you need to differentiate yourself in your craft, that's why you've got to stand out. So your craft might not be what you went to school for. It might be something you gravitate toward and you build your skills over time. Or it might be that you get on a large project and develop expertise in something specific that allows you to hone that craft. Because business always comes down to relationships, this is never about beating your teammates or one-upping them. The people who will go the furthest, be the most respected, and become the most known as having professional gravitas, they'll be the ones who support others along the way. So no matter where you are in your career, you have something you know that you can use to help others learn and grow. So supporting others along their path is one of the best tools in your tool belt towards being recognized in your field, and it's part of building your professional reputation. And reputation is critical to what we're going to discuss next in sponsorship. All right, so here we go, mentorship versus sponsorship. So in the words of a couple more smart people, mentorship equals advice, sponsorship equals advice plus action. That was from Bonnie Marcus. And then another writer put it this way: while a mentor is someone who has knowledge and will share it with you, a sponsor is a person who has power and will use it for you. Carla Harris called a sponsor the person who pounds the table on your behalf. So let's talk a bit more concretely about what these relationships look like. So mentorship is about changing the mentee. It's about changing the skill set of the person who's getting mentored. So it's a knowledge transfer and it takes time. So hallmark indicators are sharing knowledge and sharing time with the mentee. Mentorship often involves one-on-one interaction. So sponsorship is just a little different. The groundwork for sponsorship has been laid after substantial trust has been built in the relationship between two people. So I agree with Carla Harris here. She's a Wall Street exec on this front, that sponsorship involves a metaphorical currency, performance currency, and relationship currency, where performance currency is the currency generated by you delivering what was asked of you and probably a bit extra. Every time you deliver on an assignment above people's expectations, you generate this performance currency. And as Carla says, it works like the stock market. Anytime a company says to Wall Street that they will deliver 25 cents a share, and that company actually delivers 40 cents a share, that stock goes up, and so will yours. Performance currency is valuable because it will get you notice. It will create a reputation for you, and it may attract a sponsor, because strong performance currency raises your level of visibility in the environment such that a sponsor might be attracted to you. Why? Because everybody loves a star. So when I mention trust, it's not simply trust in you as a person, it's trust that you're the type of person to consistently deliver exceptional outcomes. When sponsorship occurs, it may not be something formally discussed between the sponsor and the protege. The hallmark of sponsorship is that the protege does not have to be present for sponsorship to occur. Indeed, in most cases, the protege won't be present. It's a type of advocacy that someone with power or influence chooses to do on the protege's behalf. So let me share a quick example with you to illustrate this. This is just totally made up, but I have a colleague named Vinny here at Carollo. He's a technical expert at system startup. So let's, and I mean, for those of you not in water and wastewater, I mean like large treatment system startup. Okay, so he's a technical expert. So let's imagine he takes me under his wing. He teaches me technical and other project-related knowledge that I can then take and apply on my own in future projects. So that's great. That's mentoring. Here's an important distinction. Whether I succeed or fail to apply that knowledge appropriately, that's all on me. Vinny has done his part to mentor me. Whether I stink or excel doesn't directly impact Vinny's own career path or credibility. However, in the case of sponsorship, the leader becomes an advocate for the protege. So after working with Vinny for a long time, we've established rapport. He trusts me to not only do a good job, but to do right by the company. Now he is a tenured and senior level professional who knows that he has influence. And based on our relationship, the reputation I've built with Vinny through my work, etc., he decides to become my sponsor and advocate, perhaps even unconsciously. So what that would look like is he advocates on my behalf to other leaders, especially behind closed doors when I'm not there. Now it's personal. He has put his influence, his social capital behind supporting me. Now, if I mess up as his protege or I abandon the company after he's thrown his weight behind me, his reputation could take a hit too. So that's the core distinctions that I would make between a mentorship relationship versus a sponsorship relationship. Okay, so more about sponsorship now. The sponsor chooses the protege, not the other way around. The sponsor is choosing to send the elevator back down to pick up a certain person. This has to do with establishing credibility, establishing value first, having a value proposition that is meaningful to a potential sponsor. Your value could be demonstrated by something like exceptional motivation and expertise in areas that the sponsor cares about. It's about the sponsor seeing the capabilities of a protege and believing in the outcomes of their efforts. So what will a sponsor do? They will identify and share potential opportunities with the protege. The sponsor will recommend the protege for opportunities. Notably, the protege may be unaware of the sponsor's hand in the matter. The sponsor pushes for the protege to receive stretch assignments. And the sponsor may cover for the protege in the event that they come under scrutiny by other leaders. So, like recommendations, the protege may be totally unaware of this helping hand. The important thing to remember is this, and write this down for number 4. I can set myself up for success such that I garner sponsorship. So one more time. I can set myself up for success such that I garner sponsorship. I can set myself up for success such that I garner sponsorship. All right, so what's sponsorship good for? I've heard it described as sort of like Santa Claus, because it's a little bit nebulous and it's not something that you can necessarily directly ask for, right? So what's it good for? It's really important for those of you who have high ambition to climb a ladder, particularly in large corporations and firms. And then I want to make a note here that I think is important, and you should definitely do some additional research on your own about this. So there's been some research on what it looks like for men and women to receive mentorship and sponsorship in the workplace. And basically, members of underrepresented groups in a workplace, they're typically over-mentored and under-sponsored. So these individuals get lots of advice, sometimes unsolicited, coffee outings, offers to teach them new skills, but it's rarer for them to see the support that looks like sponsorship. So let's talk about giving sponsorship for a moment. So the research has shown that male sponsors are more effective than female sponsors. So males more effective than females giving sponsorship, regardless of the gender of the person who's being sponsored, the person who's receiving the sponsorship. Female sponsors, regardless of whether or not the protege is male or female, tend to be less effective. Less effective meaning their recommendations are seen as less credible. So mitigating this. So the mitigating factor is tenure with the organization. So the general gist of the story is that if you take as given that gender discrimination continues to exist at least in the promotion and retention process. The perception then is that women who are able to succeed and get into leadership positions are likely to be especially competent. So proteges of really senior women actually end up doing just as well as proteges of men. So the big difference is that you can be a relatively inexperienced male sponsor and still be relatively effective for your proteges. But if you're an equally experienced female sponsor, your proteges don't necessarily benefit. So you can hear about that research on the Harvard Business Review Women at Work podcast. There's one that's specifically about sponsorship. Okay, this is what I want you to write down for number 5 then. I am a future leader. It is important that I seek out other views and perspectives so that I can be the most empathetic leader I am capable of becoming. How will I choose to be a leader? And you can reflect on that on your own later. Okay, so one more time. I am a future leader. It's important that I seek out other views and perspectives so that I can be the most empathetic leader I'm capable of becoming. Okay, game time. I'm going to give you 15 or 20 seconds starting now to take down my phone number and the instructions for the game we're doing. So scribble down quick. This is why you were taking notes by hand. All right, empowering women, thank you so much for joining me for this discussion on sponsorship and mentorship. I hope that I was able to provide some information to help you better understand the relationships and the roles that they can play in helping you succeed in your career. I'd love to hear from you after the conference. You can access me via meltheengineer.com. I'm also on social media at Mel the Engineer and Miss Mel the Engineer, so I'd love to hear from you there. And it would really mean a lot to me and the entire Empowering Women in Industry team if you would take a moment to subscribe to the podcast. So it's the Empowering Women podcast, and you can access that on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and on the website empoweringwomenpodcast.com. Thanks again, and I'll see you soon.